from the Pathway Studios in Johnston proper. You are live from the Path.
I am a working man. I get things done. Work for the Holy Ghost. Work for the Son. I am a working man. Oh, yes,
And you're listening to Live from the Path. We're coming from the Pathway Studios here in Johnston proper.
I
was born here, I'll die here.
We're not born here.
We're not born here.
No, pretty close.
I'm a man of constant sorrow.
All right. Here's what we got going on the show this evening. So there were a number of you who did not complain about the show last week, and that tells me you didn't listen to it.
You really should have.
And so you're not being discerning, and you should change your ways about that.
Either that or you're not passionate enough to tell us when you are discerning, in which case both are problems. Let us know. We know you're either not watching or you are and you don't care.
Yeah.
Just text me and say, "Hey, Boova, miss you." And I'll feel better about myself.
No, whatever. I don't care. All right, here's what we got going on the show this evening. There was an article on the Christian Post that said the main reason people ditch God. What do you think it is, Mike? Have you read the article?
No.
Do you read for fun?
No. No.
Can you read?
How many letters of the alphabet can you name? Go. Stop.
Alpha?
That's it.
I was going to start
Sigma.
with I was going to start with G. I don't know why. Why wouldn't I start at the beginning?
Hey, I had it in my mind. In fact, I was in a discussion in the car with one of my kids a couple of days ago around, like, it feels like the English, like the UK, United Kingdom English, they don't use the Z. Like, we use Z for things that they don't use Z for.
Yeah, that's because they use Z.
How do they represent sleeping?
Well, right, but like it's the same. I don't know. I think they saw logs.
Z.
But anyway, I was trying to figure out, like, when someone was putting the English language together, like, is there one where they're like, we don't really need it, but like, what tipped the scales? Like, when the S was available, what caused them to go, I think we really need this Z? Do you know anything, Mike? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't care about this, Ben.
You should ask AI.
You shouldn't have spent any more than about 3 seconds on this.
I've been thinking about it all week.
I'm gonna ask AI why English has both Z and S when they both could accomplish the same thing just with S.
Well,
S can do more.
It's because of Fussy and Fuzzy. Those are two different things.
What about?
I'm feeling fuzzy.
No,
I'm feeling fuzzy.
Somebody made the same sound a bee makes, and they're like, they don't go psst.
Ew.
They go bzzz. And so they're like, we got to represent that somehow.
You also said different starting consonants with that, weirdly enough.
Yeah, that got real confusing.
You went buzz and then psst, like
Bzz, psst.
Where did language...
Wait, make a B and an S sound. Bzz.
Do we have to work through what sound a bee makes versus what sound a bee
try
makes? Buzz
Yeah.
and psst.
No,
Is
now
what
make
you
a
just-
B. Now do a B and an S together.
Okay.
Bzz.
All right. This is the right time to say we're opening a Patreon account of which you can pay for extra content. We're going to move
on
this.
phonics.
We're going to move this to the extra part. $20 a month.
Boova and Mike figure out how to pronounce a P versus a B. Bzz.
Okay, what's the main reason people ditch God?
Yeah. What do you think it is?
I think it's people.
Okay, you think it's because Christians are offensive?
Yeah, crap, I don't know. I would say that people have set an expectation on what God's going to do and what He's not, and He didn't make it.
Okay. God's not meeting their expectations.
Yes.
Okay, Boo, what do you think?
I think it is people misrepresenting God. As in, they claim the name of God and then are just rough people and are not doing anything alongside it. And so people lose faith thinking there's no chance that there's a God behind that kind of behavior or that kind of person.
Right. If there is a God, He sucks because He's letting people tarnish His name.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Dan, what do you think?
I think they will say it's because Christians are hypocrites, but in reality, it's just because they're rebellious.
They don't want to be
They
controlled.
don't give a rip. They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
they got to blame somebody else.
Okay. All right, let's check it out. This is by Robin P. Shoemaker. She said, I've had a flurry of in-your-face confrontations over God lately.
Whoa.
The most recent occurred at a funeral. A person at the visitation went on an extended rant that pinballed in every direction and included me being peppered with so many, how can you believe that I lost count? Then there's the 30-something girl who bailed on the faith after a terrible failed marriage to a person in the ministry who turned out to be a moral failure, which included extra heapings of guilt thrown onto her by the loving members of the church she used to attend. Last but not least is another woman raised in the faith who now views Christianity as repressive and kicked it to the curb because of her sexual and other moral preferences. It's been quite the scene. A couple years back, I wrote an article on 3 reasons people reject the faith, and all of them were present in these latest encounters, along with the ever-present dislike of God's moral law. The first person had bad events come into his life that pretty much train-wrecked everything. Although not aware of it, they were wrestling with the issue. Nobody cares. He was now nodding in agreement with atheist Richard Dawkins, who wrote, "In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Well, that's hopeful. The second person had bad people come into her life. She was locking arms with Gandhi, who said, "I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." The third person had bad morals well up within her life. She'd settled into the position articulated well by some fellow who said, "I had motives for not wanting." I liked it. I thought this was actually a pretty spot-on quote. "I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning. For myself, as no doubt for most of my friends, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom." And so I think you can toss out sexual freedom if you had to, but any freedom, like
Right.
it's easier if you toss out the sense of a moral good. It liberates you from the burden of failing to adhere to it, regardless of whether that constraint is that you believe there to be.
Yeah, that's being really generous with the word freedom.
Yeah. When you talk with these 3 people and others in their same shoes long enough, you find that they may have different reasons for stiff-arming God, but they all have one thing in common. As the guy at the funeral went on about why God couldn't exist, I noticed something interesting about him. He was furious. Same with the 2 women I described. That's a strange feeling to have about something you don't think exists. No one gets that mad at Santa Claus because they don't get what they want at Christmas. Pastor Doug Wilson, who debated the late atheist Christopher Hitchens on multiple occasions, said that many atheists have 2 declarations. 1, there is no God. And 2, I hate him. On the one hand, the Bible talks about the mind of the unbeliever being hostile toward God and the rage being directed at the Creator, but there's something more going on here. The mindset is that we're not getting what we want and deserve and are angry about it. So that's the sum up. It's like all of these things are people have an expectation. The expectation is not being met. There is a creator God. If a creator God exists who could have said it right, again, they either stink at their job or there simply isn't one, which is a very hopeless position, right? Like, think of the ways that people were reacting, the funeral person and the person who was married to the person with the moral failure. Like, and maybe it's a religious crutch to be like, I have to believe that this means something or it matters to someone, as opposed to someone mistreated me horribly. I am the recipient of a grave injustice, and the world is indifferent about it. Because the same indifference that allows people freedom, or what they believe to be freedom to do whatever they want, also crushes people without any consideration or concern if there's no moral reason behind it. And so what a callous way to even think of the world. We should, if we believe that to be true, you should lament that. You should lament that there is a quote unquote freedom that allows you to not have to be bogged down by any sense of either personal or corporate morality, because that same thing is spitting in the eyes of the poor. It's crushing the lame. It's more like atrocities go unmourned because it's indifferent. That's a hopeless world.
Yeah, because not only is the definition of morality a floating definition, but it varies largely by your scope of perspective, right? So, like, even if on a moral stance, like you did what was best for your family, like, for example, like the folks across the street, you were starving and the people across the street had food and refused to give you any, right? Like, you're like, well, on a sliding scale, if I just rob the people across the street from me, now my family is eating. That's why I should be able to do anything to feed my family. That on its is a moral good, you know. But like if you, I think that, like, these arguments are always, they're interesting to me because they already come with a lawyer spin on them, where they only allow you to look at it in one way, right? Your freedom to do whatever you want obviously has the ability, and most of the time the consequence, of depending on the freedom of someone else, right? Your actions are not happening in a vacuum. So it's not like ultimate freedom is just flying around everywhere. If I say I have the freedom to do whatever I want, that means I can take this car if I want to. I can kill that guy if I want to. I can sleep with that gal if I want to. Like, there's consequences all attached to that, which means that the freedom that someone else was enjoying is now impinged upon because of my freedom.
Right, and if there's no moral good, then that's fine.
Then there's nothing good or bad about it. It just is.
Yeah, right. And I think that was one of the points they brought up and said in his message, Mercy Not Sacrifice, Tim Keller talks about two atheists he knows who aren't married and are fuming over their singleness, not just distressed, they're mad. They've told him that others who aren't as good, kind, thoughtful, etc. as they are have spouses, and they feel that is so unfair. Unfair? How do you get unfair from life if you're an atheist? Go back to Dawkins' quote and tell me where fair is. Like, that's the thing. There's not a fair. There's not like a sense of what is good, what is not good. And like even as societies like ignore a religious context, political societies or countries or whatever, like you're wrestling with some notion of like, here's the fairness that we agree to at a time. We agreed fairness in 1780 was that people of a certain skin color were 2/3 of a person. And so, like, what people agreed to at any given time is not really a good assessment as to what is fair.
But we base a lot of our modern thought on that. Like, that's why we believe we've evolved from things, because of what we poorly judged as morality 200 years ago. We're like, well, we're past that now. As we continue to poorly judge, like, the situations that we're in now, like we swing the other way completely. Where now we say, okay, well, if a 40-year-old man falls in love with a 9-year-old girl, well, that should be his freedom. Right? That should be morally acceptable, because we've evolved past the point of trying to call balls and strikes on the way that people feel about things.
Which is so interesting, because like one of the values or virtues of the American system is that like we've provided a very it's built in that there are ways to correct our errancy. Right, that the people can vote, and we can rethink, and we can reapply, and that the Constitution can be amended and changed. Right, that's part of its brilliance. But at that core, it's an admission that we are errant. That at any moment in time, even as a majority society, we get our morality wrong. Like we miss it. We give the vote, we take the vote, right? Like we say, oh, well, these people can cast the vote. We think of the things that we've amended as a value to the system, but it doesn't support our trust in humans as a whole to say in general we get things right, even though I think there's a basic image of God thing that like a lot of the morals bend towards, hey, we probably shouldn't kill other people, although you'll argue over what's a person or not. And so it's interesting, the hopelessness that should exist in a world without a moral right. Now, that actually doesn't even argue for Yahweh. That just argues for a moral right. It doesn't have to be the God of the Bible. It doesn't have to be the God that we describe. But like, it does present a situation where like it just simply isn't right to look out of the world if you have no moral belief system or one that's personal to you. And to claim anything is unfair. Hey, as a matter of fact, take a group of people and go, hey, that guy didn't pay. They're not paying their fair share of taxes. Again, like, what do we mean? What makes it fair, not fair? Like your opinion, same person to your early example, Mike, would go, it's not fair that my neighbor has more than me. Well, I mean, there's all kinds of rational ways to justify it. Maybe your neighbor worked for it. Maybe you didn't do anything. But your view of fair, not fair isn't based on anything except for the thing that you're feeling at the moment.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't I don't know that I would agree. Once again, I don't know that atheism is huge of a problem as I thought it would be. Even I was just talking to a guy at work the other day. Like it had knocked me off my feet to find out that the man is not an atheist. Right? Like he agreed to. He's like, yeah, I believe in a higher power, and he believes that it's not what I believe, right? But like the fact that like he even would take that on as a thought process in his life, it just surprised me anyway.
Yeah.
But I really feel like most of the time when I find folks that have said, well, I don't have a relationship with God, or I don't really believe God does this, like they believed one lie somewhere, and honestly they never actually tried following Jesus. They never actually did it. Like they heard the thought of it, or the rules were impressed upon them, and what they thought were restraints were tickets to freedom, but they saw them as restraints.
Yeah.
And then they went out and they lived life however they wanted, and they said, I will never go back to those restraints. I'll tell you that. Even as the choices that they're making continue to bury them, and it has no outpouring of joy or peace. But they're like, well, this is still better than the constraints that I grew up with, or I thought that came with a life from following Christ. And like, it just feels like you never actually knew him. Like, you may have known like a church structure, or you may have believed a lie from your grandma or something. Like, something along the line convinced you that God was not offering you freedom from both sin and like the tougher parts of being a human. You know, and like you thought it was a rule-based thing to try to show that you were good enough. And like, you feel like we've nailed this in every sermon ever taught, that that's not the deal, but is really the set of cards that a lot of people are working from.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about like how many folk, I think to your point, like there's a difference between like how many people are running into who are like staunchly atheists versus people who would claim a belief in a God that is of no particular consequence to their life.
Yes, yeah, and like actually, to the lady that married the preacher, this is a great example, right? Like, this also seems to be a societal change where your feelings get to be more of the reality than actually the situation, right? Because if you were to take a higher level view of what happened to that gal, is it terrible? Yes. Should it not have happened? No, it definitely should not have happened. But at the end of the day, a fallible jerk store man like treated you very poorly. God didn't do any of that, right? A guy that claimed to represent the teachings and the ways of living that were handed down through Jesus Christ obviously did not believe in that. And he did whatever he wanted. And so, like, you get to be upset about it. You get to have your life shaken and broken by it. But, like, I guess I don't understand. Like, if you had this relationship with God or believed in the things at all in the first place, it is the thing that rides you through those situations, not the thing that falls as a casualty of poor human behavior, which is flat out, like, told throughout the Bible, like humans' tendencies to not trust God and trust their own ways and continue on paths that will otherwise destroy them, that God begged them not to do for all the reasons that he offered his freedom for, and they will continue to do them. And then you're like, well, I knew this pastor and he was a jerk and he was mean to me and he cheated on me and he ruined my life. Now, yeah, he was part of some very bad events that happened to you, but at the end of the day, when your life is in the hands of the Savior, that guy just gets to move off to the wayside. Okay, that bad thing happened, and it did happen, but like, it doesn't get to ruin the rest of my life. That guy don't hold that much power.
Right.
I find that I think that happens a lot. Like, I think we've moved feelings into the number one position, and reality matters not as much, right? And that's really hard, especially in the day and age that we grow up in. Like, try walking up to a woman who's been cheated on and say, look, that's terrible, and I agree it's terrible, but like, we can't donate the rest of our life to this thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it happens. Sin happens. You know it happens. Earthly consequences are maybe you're not married to that guy anymore. Maybe you are. But like, either way, like, it doesn't get to color the rest of your life as terrible. And like, I think we talk about trauma a lot, and like, some of it are things that will shape your life in a certain way, but like, I don't know that, like, we're more leaning on the side of letting it define your life. And I think your Savior gets to define that. And God already says what you're worth and what he brings by following him through peace and joy. And like, you're accepting none of it.
Right. The article, one of the things it also said is that people, like, where people are getting angry, C.S. Lewis spoke to this, the more you obey your conscience, the more your conscience will demand of you. And your natural self, which is thus being starved and hampered and worried at every turn, will get angrier and angrier. And so, like, it was kind of the thought around people get angry at God. Like, one, I suppose, like, if you're left with a world of which there is no particular hope, like, you got direct your anger somewhere. Because, like, realistically, there's no individual person or situation to direct it at. So you chose God to otherwise do it. But then you're also left with the moral burden of yourself. And this is why I think it's difficult to be someone who goes like, I believe in a higher power. Like, I feel like that would just be like nagging at me all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know enough about this. I get this nagging sense that like, I'm probably not living up to it. It's a genie who may help sometimes, and I'm comforted by that. But like, I'm also kind of, it just feels like someone's on me. And because there's no personal definition to this God, you don't know what it wants. It's as arbitrary and as a Greek god or as a Roman god.
Kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this unknown entity out there that's maybe watching me, maybe not, maybe cares, maybe doesn't, maybe he's going to squash me. I mean, like, if you don't know, I was on, I don't know, some social media thing the other day, and you somehow, you read something and you go on a goose chase and you start reading comments. I don't know what started it, but all these people were talking about haunted houses in the area, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, my house is haunted," and blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking they were so nonchalant about like, I'm thinking, I mean, then you get into the whole, okay, I don't think it's a haunted thing, but it's like they believe it's a ghost, and it's like you're just hanging out in your house and you think there's a ghost. I mean, it's like, doesn't that kind of bother you? Like, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing was kind of wild to me. And then from my perspective, I was like, well, that sounds like demonic to me, and I'm thinking, so you're just hanging out in your house with demons? I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
That's Gerald. Don't worry about him.
Yeah. Someone said they had a haunted cat, and I'm like, what?
A haunted cat?
What? Yeah, like this cat shows up, and it's like a spirit. I'm like, anyway, yeah.
You're reckoning with a lot of things in that situation.
I mean,
I believe in an afterlife. I believe in the possibility that spirits don't pass on, and I also believe that cats have said spirits and have the opportunity to not pass on sometimes. And Whiskers is still here with me.
But yeah. But there's this generic higher power out there, spiritual world out there that we're intersecting with once in a while. That would drive me insane if I didn't have some type of basis for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a bit terrifying to, even if we're open to it, it feels like it's going to upend your life, right? If like the kind of nebulous notional God that may or may not exist, like you can at least, I feel like it would nag at you, but you can dismiss it. But if you tried to embrace the reality of a God that you otherwise rejected as being real, like, again, Jesus changes everything. And so to the extent that you are open to that, it's a re-examination of not only all the stuff that you've thought or believed in the past, but like, what does your next year look like? What does it mean to the things that you have taught or not taught your children? Like, I do think there is an emotional barrier at times to reckon with a world that you've seen completely differently, because then you have to re-reckon with your life choices. And it doesn't need to feel that heavy, but like I often think that there are people who have lived life in such a way that, like, the way that they won't hear it. They won't hear that they've lived it wrong or that they've seen it wrong, because the consequence of coming to those terms is like a load. It's a load to rethink your relationships in light of you being wrong. And I think it's hard.
Do you realize the things that you have to believe about the afterworld to have these hauntings? Like, just think about it. Like, in your in your perception of this, like, there is an afterlife, and like, you have to go, okay, I don't know exactly how it happens. I'm going to assume that it's like Casper style, like it's spirits with unfinished business here on Earth.
Yeah.
But it turns out their unfinished business is to shut a door every once in a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe move
Now
a
I
plate.
feel better.
Yeah.
Right? Or let the cat out. You didn't remember letting the cat out. Had to have been the ghost. Right? Like, the unfinished business that kept this thing from moving on to its final resting place was small irritations at your place. Like, that doesn't make a lick of sense.
Now, is it possible that is part of the Satan is bound work of Jesus on the cross?
That what?
He used to be able to do more.
And so now Satan can only close your cupboards.
The demonic activity is very restrained.
So we've got
The
Close 3
deceiver
doors.
is here. I know I shut that cupboard.
We had a gal show up to one of our prayer rooms once who had some definite demonic activity going on, and was describing things happening, and it was like clearly demonic, and she definitely, the fear in her eyes told us she was seeing things in the room when we were there, right? And so we knew this was real, and we were reading scripture, we were talking, and all she really, the key thing is like, okay, you want this gone, right? Yes. Well, she was doing some things that would open doors, to the spiritual world. But like, you probably need to close these doors. You need to get some Jesus going on here.
Hey, just curious, Dan. Are you able to share like what types of things?
Things like she'd be alone in the night, and like the music would turn on. there would be in the couch next to her, like the seat would actually push down, and like she could feel the presence.
Okay.
Same as in her bed, doors opening. I mean, things that were.
Yep.
You know.
What types of things was she doing that you felt like were opening doors?
There were drugs and sexual things, and that's really, I mean, an outright rebellion type of thing. I know God, but I used to love God, but I got to do my own thing now.
Gotcha.
And we were explaining that you really need to clean the house, as Jesus said. If we're gonna cast these demons out, they're just gonna come back. I mean, you've got to. Are you ready to make a change? Well, no, I'm not really ready to do that. Like,
So no change then.
No, we probably were in there an hour and a half at least, and she actually threw up and ran out and never saw her again. I mean, she couldn't handle it anymore in the room there. Pretty intense time. But you see these spiritual things going on, and it was clearly fearful to her.
Yes.
So that would seem a right reaction to spiritual things to me, right? Like it seems odd that it gets to be like, oh yeah, my house is haunted, and you're just like nonchalant, like it's fine. Every once in a while, I think I see a shadow of whatever, and you're like, I don't think people ever process the whole thing that they have to believe to make true the things that are coming out of their mouth. Right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, I believe in hauntings, but you're so nonchalant about it that you have zero control over this spiritual thing that appears to be living in your house, but doing like low level irritation things. Most people are not talking about demon possession things. They're talking about like odd irritating stuff, like it moved my keys or something, or like whatever the cat. And like for you to believe that is happening, you have to acknowledge that there's a spiritual life that you don't understand, and you need to try to figure out why this is even allowed. Second of all, if it is even allowed, like it still has to have a reason for doing what it's doing, right? Like if there's got to be a thing that is orchestrating it. So like if it didn't pass on to its final resting place, what is it even doing here? And for its end result to be moving the dog bowl, right?
Yeah.
That like can't you think about that for a couple seconds and go, this is utterly ridiculous? Or there's this whole thing that I'm just like, it's a house of cards on why I believe this even happens. You know what I'm saying? Like it sounds so ridiculous when you think about it. Now the demonic thing and the spiritual world thing, like the Bible speaks to this, like things that like cause a fear or a complete anxiety within you, or like color the way that you look at life to the point that you don't see light in it. This makes sense. Like this is a spiritual oppression, and the Bible's clear on that, right? And it can actually do some legit damage. But like these lazy, like spoon movers, I don't understand. I don't understand how you can put this together in your mind and be like, I was on page 86, and when I woke up, it was on 114. That had to have been Myrtle. She was in here flipping through my book. You know what I'm saying? Like it sounds so dumb.
It's funny how like some of the reports of like evil spiritual activity, demonic activity in the United States is so like blasé and lazy. And then again, other parts of the world, you go to the Haiti, the Dominican Republic, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, and like these are actual like things that you would more expect.
Yeah.
I was going to share this with you guys, and I don't think I ever did. Like it was recently in Minnesota. It was a library. They held a demon summoning ceremony.
Oh.
So who did the church or the demon summoner?
Some group, but at the librry, as a public library. I'll have to find that and send it. But
the public library does a lot of public programs.
I mean, I don't know. But they think we're just not. We could be more friendly to the demons, and we just don't understand.
Oh,
that.
for heaven's sakes!
And I thought we're going to see more and more stuff that we've been discounting as probably not real, or we're just going to see more and more stuff.
Yeah.
Just imagine going to a library and seeing a flyer up on the car, like the wall that says, "Come on out and be a part of the Sons of Beelzebul."
It does, like, once again, like, what's the story? The sons of Squaws.
Yeah.
Skivas. Or whatever.
Oh, yeah, Squaws.
Right? Where they like, they thresh these dudes like freaking wheat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, like, if you think, like, in my mind, I'm like, they find us so unthreatening that, like, there's no threshing. There's not even needed. Right? They're destroying themselves. Why would I even have to thresh anybody? Right? They're willing to go to a library and like, have a friends outreach program for demons, and they're like, we got no examples to make here. These ones already belong to us. They're idiots. And so, like, it seems like some of the spiritual things that we talk about that happen in other parts of the world and don't tend to happen much in the United States or Western culture, like, it's for the same reason that, like, it feels like Jesus says the only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah, because the rest of them are wasted on you.
Yeah, the rest. There's parts of the world where they're fighting a war. We're playing laser tag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's happening.
Yeah, because like people are always begging. They're like, if God would just show up, if God would just show up, if God would just show up. And like Jesus speaks to this. He's like, I could totally show up.
Yeah.
And it would not mean a lick
Yeah.
to you.
You'll still miss it.
It would not
Yeah.
change a thing in your estimation. Even if, like, you're trying to trick me. You're like basically trying to peer pressure the Lord into going, if you do this thing, then I will totally believe. And God goes, yeah, I hear you saying that. You don't actually believe that because you won't. Because I know these things.
And that goes to Dan's point on the story of the prayer room, is that, like, this person believed that demonic activity was real,
Confident, yeah.
like knew it, like you knew, but when faced with, here's what it means to get this to go away, and you go, nope. What other sign do you need? Like, you're seeing the things, you can tell, you can feel it in the room, you can tell that there's something going on when people are praying for you, and like, you got everything you need. And she goes, no, I don't want to give that stuff up yet.
And it was one of those deals where, obviously I'm pretty skeptical of the whole thing. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, you can pick up all this stuff from the average movie.
Sure.
And at some point, there were two or three of us where, something happened. I don't remember now. It's been long enough ago.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, this is the real deal.
Right.
I mean, there was terror at a certain moment before she ran.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, there was something behind us going on that we couldn't see.
Yep.
And anyway, yeah. And by the way, that was an art center or an art whatever, not a
library.
Not a library. Okay. Big difference.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
The artists
makes
get it
more
down.
sense.
You're listening to Live from the Path. Thanks for hanging out with us.
I don't even remember what we're talking about.
Well, so we started talking about
Demons.
no, the thing people were
brought us astray.
The key problem of an atheist, like what their core thing is.
Their key problem was demons.
And then we got into demons at the
Sorry.
library, like the plot of Ghostbusters 1, really.
Yeah.
Demons at the library. Hey, there was another article I saw. So Buva's got some Ask the Pastor on Proverbs. We're going to get to that here in just a second. This was interesting. Dan, I think you probably saw this because I think we've got some mutual friends who would have shared this. But there was an article that came out by Bob Russell.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Russell was a pastor. I love Bob Russell.
Uh-huh.
I think he's a great fella. But he produced a post, and it says it was about when the church endorses drinking. And so he says, a recent invitation to a church's small group was titled Bible and Beer. Another church group invited members to join them for a tour of Kentucky's Bourbon Trail. These invitations for church-sponsored activities illustrate the dramatic shift that has occurred toward the use of alcohol since I started in ministry 60 years ago. Now, I'll be honest with you, this has a bit of the flame like the one we talked about last week. It feels a little bit like, oh, here's the challenges, or here's the thing that was true 30 years ago.
People used to keep gin in their cupboard, and that was it.
I want you to hear Bob out and remind me that I will. He's awesome. He's an excellent fellow. However, here's his description. 60 years ago, it was customary to see a sign over a liquor store that read "Closed Election Day." Most state governments maintain a prohibitionary ban requiring liquor stores to be closed during polling hours. Blah, blah, blah. They know drinking numbed the mind and people needed to vote with a clear head. 60 years ago, it was illegal to sell alcohol anywhere on Sunday. In most states today, the sacredness of the Lord's Day is completely ignored and alcohol flows freely the entire weekend. 60 years ago, most secular colleges and almost all church-related schools had rules against drinking. Now, authorities ignore the problem and the label of party school is considered an asset to recruiting. For the past 60 years, the University of Kentucky had prohibited the sale of alcoholic beverages at football games. It has been under considerable pressure recently to lift this ban as being too restrictive. 60 years ago, it was considered improper for a woman to be seen drinking in public. But at sporting events today, it is not unusual to see a young woman climbing up the arena steps with a beer in each hand. 60 years ago, it was inappropriate for public school teachers to drink. In fact, the public consumption of alcohol was considered grounds for termination. Yet today, there's often an open bar at educators' conventions. 60 years ago, most pastors preached against alcohol consumption and pleaded for church members to abstain totally. Unfortunately, in their zeal, some erroneously insisted the Bible forbids alcohol, often quoting Proverbs, blah, 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 while ignoring passages like Psalm 104, which was wine gladdens human hearts. Today, in contrast, the pendulum has been swung so far in the opposite direction that many pastors and church officials themselves are comfortable with being social drinkers. Alcohol is served at wedding receptions, inside church facilities, and church groups serve alcohol during Bible studies. Church policies against staff consumption of alcohol are winked at or repealed. If someone expresses disagreement with the church's weakened stance, they are flippantly dismissed as too legalistic. Why has the attitude toward drinking changed so drastically? I guess, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, what's shifted here? Because that is a significant. The question, like, it's a societal shift for sure.
Right.
How much of that is the church shift is maybe the same question, maybe not the same question. I'm not sure. 'Cause, like, the question is how much of that was actually driven by biblical standard versus just things that are shifting in the society as a whole. But I don't know. Dan, do you have a thought about why that has shifted?
I can say I was in the transition period because I know exactly what he's talking about. I remember alcohol not on Sundays. I remember. I mean, like there was like it was covered in the stores. It wasn't even in the grocery stores.
Right.
But,
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was like you just didn't.
You couldn't do it.
was
Yep.
Not allowed. And it was definitely in the church a huge taboo. I mean.
Yep.
Yeah. No smoking. No drinking. No dancing.
No
Cards.
dancing.
Were you in Footloose?
Footloose was real, right?
Yep.
And it was really my generation kind of came going, but it's not really what it says,
Right.
You know, in the scripture,
Right.
And so I'd be like, I mean, it just says don't get drunk. It doesn't say you can't, but usually, you know, we kind of kept with. However, there may be people in our congregation that struggle with alcoholism, and for them to see me with one gives them permission personally to have 12.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
So I went a good 20, 30 years not touching an ounce of anything. And then kind of finally softened a little bit because biblically, you know, well, like I said, it just says don't get drunk.
Yes.
You don't.
Right.
There's no wisdom in it.
Yes. Yep. He says some pastors justify the change in attitude to being more spiritually mature today than church leaders of 60 years ago. I think that's wrong. If anybody who says that is that's dumb.
Yeah.
There's no reason to claim a maturity. There's a good, to Dan's point, there's a good caution in it. There's a
Yeah.
recognition of how your behavior impacts other people. All things that feel legalistic, I think probably can be done for good intent, and in some cases are perfectly fine. The question is, like, did you become someone's jailer on the process? So yeah, I think that would be wrong if that's their perception. But he provided, so here's his follow-up, though. He said, because I follow the principle of speaking where the Bible speaks and being silent where the Bible is silent, and that's where you end up with people who do non-instrumental, so
Right.
it's a little bit strict. I do not make alcohol consumption a test of fellowship. However, I'm not convinced that today's church leaders' more liberal approach toward drinking is a positive change. Now, here's his examples. For instance, one well-known pastor recently excused his moral indiscretion on the grounds he had a little too much to drink at a church party. It's not an alcohol problem. I mean, it is,
Right.
but like the fact that you would find that justifiable is less of an alcohol problem. It's more of like it's a hard issue. Like you shouldn't be leading people if you believe that is a viable excuse.
Yeah, because it's not you leading anymore.
Yes.
Right. Like, I mean, by the time that you're drunk, you're not firing on your capacity anymore. Right. Like it is almost a different version of you that's speaking.
Yeah.
And also, the alcohol I think it just loosens lips. Like, it doesn't come up with new thoughts or new actions. It lowers inhibitions to do things that you were already
boundaries.
intending to do, or were stopped doing in the presence of clear mind. But when you're in the presence of that kind of alcohol, it like I said, lowers those inhibitions.
Yeah. He says, at another church, one member complained that an elder regularly served communion while under the influence.
What?
Who's this drunk fella?
That's a Sunday morning drunkard?
Like, again, this guy's next level.
Also, what is under the influence? Like, I really don't care. It's still pretty rough in any situation, but having a beer and going to church is different than I was at the bar all night, am still drunk from it, and now I'm serving communion.
Maybe they were smelling cheap cologne and assumed they'd been drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
mean,
smell like brute.
God straight up killed a couple people for offering unauthorized fire. Like still fire to the Lord, but not the fire that he had asked for.
While drinking.
Why? Right. And then these fellas, like, I don't know how that doesn't come out to be like astronomically terrible, right? Like you're basically filling a Levitical role here, serving this communion, and you've not even tried, right? You didn't even show up to try to take on the responsibility that the church has given you.
Yeah, the elder regularly served communion. Why is he still serving communion? This should have happened one time and said, Earl, we love you. You're no longer allowed to do the communion.
Yeah.
So these examples, I think these are terrible examples, to be honest with you. Like they're one-off situations of which someone should have dealt with. The guy shouldn't be leading a church anymore. I actually don't care that I care that he had a little too much to drink. I don't know what his indiscretion was. If it's as bad as what I think they're meaning, then he shouldn't.
Yeah, here's the thing. There's
the reason.
Like you look at it and say, like the guy made an offhanded comment, right, or whatever at a church function, and but he made 5 other decisions that put him in that situation, right? And so Can I, if someone says, hey man, I was drinking a little too much and I said this stuff or I did this thing, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like, I get how that happened. But you also made 5 other supporting decisions that put you in that situation. Yeah. And so this was not a failure, right, on the amount that you drank, right? Like, one, you overdrank at a church function. That was foolish. Right. Second of all, you put yourself in close proximity to another woman that ain't your wife while you were drunk at a church function, which you should. Like, it's a cascading level of poor decisions, which means that you weren't leading with the joy that God had offered you. You were leading with your attempt to grab something for yourself.
Right. See, this was a pastor, right? It wasn't the church leader.
Right.
So, I mean, you can even go a step beyond that and just go, how many jobs are out there where they say it's okay to drink before going to work? Yeah. He was working. He's the pastor.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody else was there as, hey, church function. He's like, dude, I don't care.
Yeah, it's pretty much bartender, and then that's it. Like that's pretty
and
much.
And even the bartender's got to keep it tight, right?
Exactly.
Right.
You got to take 1 shot of alcohol, and then the next 5 times somebody buys you a drink, you take a shot of water. Yeah.
Yeah. I just these feel there's a danger in it. There's totally a danger in it, and moderation is super important. And there's some people who shouldn't do it at all, and you have to be discerning about it. But I actually don't see how this is significantly different in some ways than the number of pies you ate. Either one of those things is capable of causing you physical harm.
Yeah, I'm sorry I touched that woman on the hiney. I was all jacked up on peach pie.
The blueberries got to me. Well, I mean, we've had some mega pastor guys who kind of went down because of the alcohol.
Yeah,
they couldn't stop. They were running. That's part of the symptom. There is you're running to alcohol rather than to God.
Yes,
and so there's some other things, but nonetheless you're running to alcohol, which hinders your ability to think.
The thing is it owns you. That's the problem, right? Like, it was there as it's given to you as a gift, and it's not like God is unaware of the effects of wine on people.
Yeah,
right. Like, he's totally aware of this, and so but when it starts to own you, when it starts to be the thing that's making your decisions for you, decisions that you wouldn't normally make without it, then it's not adding to you. It's driving. It's running the car.
Yeah,
that's the problem. That's what
the pies won't do that. It'll still it'll run you, but it
sometimes
won't.
It just depends on who you is.
It's just if you're diabetic, sometimes those peach pies will get you.
Yeah.
Hey, baby.
I
got another piece of pie.
I do think this made me think about a conversation we had recently when we were talking about spiritual disciplines, in that there is I think I want both. I want to be able to fight for non-legalism. Don't set 10 fences in front of something. The church frankly has always been involved. They've been involved in alcohol consumption. Jesus was a wine producer. Don't we overcrank on that one, but it just in general, they weren't afraid of alcohol, and frankly, oftentimes, again, you take Middle Ages, the church is producing alcohol because it's safer to drink than the water.
Yep.
And so, I just want to be careful that you don't overcrank on it. But even if you didn't, even if it was okay to do it, just even if you don't have to read your Bible every day, it doesn't mean that there isn't total wisdom in one abstaining, or two doing the disciplines every day because you want to, because you're conscious about it, because there's a thoughtfulness around it. I just personally, I'll say I didn't. I don't like I don't like the way alcohol impacts people that I love. And not even just because sometimes because people are just flat out stupid, but they're just different people. I don't like interacting with people who I know very well, and then when I can tell that they're not the same person, it just makes me uncomfortable. I'm who am I dealing with here? I don't even know if I like this person, even if they're not belligerent drunks. And so I have no idea what it feels like to be drunk. I've not ever tried. Well, maybe I tried once. I couldn't even do it. Like I don't like this good enough. But but then again, like there are some I had. Okay, I'm gonna tell you a quick diversion story. I was up in Minneapolis for work, and it was like snowing outside. It was cold as nothing, and like the only place that was open, because this was like in the middle of COVID, there was some sort of like German bar open, and so I went there, and I think I ordered schnitzel or something, and they had this like apple cider hot brandy. And that was the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. Like on a cold night, that will warm your bones.
This is delicious.
Okay. My boss don't listen. It was work money. I thought like everyone buys booze. I don't, but I thought, heck, man, I'll try this thing. And like you don't drink two of them, but like I probably drank half the glass. But it was great. It was really good. And so I thought like. Is there a way to do this well? Yes, probably. And so, like, I'm less concerned about the two examples he gave, but I did think this is where I know what he's trying to protect. He said at the end of the article, he goes, I made the decision to just abstain, and I've never missed out on anything. And I get that it's not a one-to-one comparison, but you really could say the same thing about the peach pie. You could go, look, I just abstained. What did I really miss out? A few peach pies here. Like you could pick all those things and lead a very like non-leavened bread way for life, and it's probably God honoring, but I'm not sure it's necessary, and that there's no like, it's not holy necessarily. It just is something, and I don't care if that's your choice. But I don't know, Bubba, what are you gonna say?
So, I made the decision alongside my wife 4 years ago that I was going to quit drinking. And so I'd never had an alcohol problem systemically. Like I'd never had a really big, like there have been times when I've been drunk and I've gotten drunk through depression and have been at parties, done stupid stuff, whatever. But it was never really an issue with me as much as peach pies are, admittedly.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation where before my wife and I got engaged, she said, I have one thing that I want you to do, and I want you to stop drinking. Because every once in a while, like when I was smoking a cigar or when I was like smoking a pork shoulder or something, I'd have a glass of whiskey or bourbon.
Just to be clear, the definitions of smoking are too different in that situation.
Yeah, no, I rolled up a whole pork shoulder in Cuban leaves, and I would smoke the thing, and it tasted delicious.
Tell the AI to create that, Mike. Yeah.
So smoking in both situations, smoking a cigar or a pork shoulder,
same
smoking. Verb is the same.
Yeah.
I would have a glass of bourbon or something. And it wasn't like I wouldn't drink a bottle of bourbon. I would literally have a small rocks glass with like 2 fingers of bourbon, and that was literally the extent of it. But she had brought up to me that like she had seen atrocities at the hands of alcohol, and her time in Africa where she saw families ripped apart by it. And in third world countries where it's like, same as here, there are plenty of situations where families are, destroyed because of alcoholism. Yeah. My family was very hurt by alcoholism. Like my mother was an alcoholic from the time that, her whole life, but as far as back as I remember, as being like 9 years old when I really found out about it. And it ruined, literally led to her it led to her suicide. I'm a firm believer in that, right? Yeah. And so she had asked me as saying that this is not something that I feel is a problem where like it's a sin issue between God and I, or it's a problem between Gian and I where we like I was getting drunk or anything like that. It was literally just a situation where like we recognized the potential of how awful that can be. And so we both made this, like she has never touched alcohol in her life. Yeah. And I have not done so in about 4 years now. Actually, I take that back. She ordered a Nojito recently from a place. Yeah. And they did not hear her correctly. So they brought her a full strength, a mojito. Oh yeah. And she took a sip of it and went, "Why does this burn me? Like why does this hurt?" It's a minty fire. And she gave it to the person that was with her, and they go, "Yeah, it's just great." And they go, and she goes, "Oh, it's obviously alcohol then." Like, so she's tasted alcohol now at the hands of Ruby Tuesday, I believe. I knew it. And yeah, right, exactly. But the fact of the matter was, it was not, like you said, it was not a situation where it was a sin-natured thing. It wasn't a situation where it was like a holiness problem between God and I, but it was recognizing the potential that I have as a very highly addictive personality. I tend to run to substances before I run to my God. It was an unnecessary thing that I was allowing, and I went, absolutely, that's fine. I'll never drink the rest of my life. And that's a thing. And so it's interesting because like with this piece, there's a legalistic nature to taking it in. There's a way to look at it that's biblical where it says, wine was a thing in that culture. People drank it all the time. It wasn't a problem. There's a level where it can become a problem, and that's where we need to steer clear of. But there's also a perspective of like, if there's a situation where you think that there's any possibility of not being able to handle it, like, you could be legalistic, and it doesn't have to be a thing where it's like, this is how I define God's, instruction, but it can certainly be a way that you define yourself to make certain that you're putting up certain fences to cover. Like me, I stay away from as many food situations as possible because I know it can be a problem, because I will spiral and run away from God and run to them as my master.
Yeah.
It's not a sin as it was. I mean, obviously God made us running on food, and so like we have to have it, but there's a level that you can go too far with it.
Yeah, and I do think like, it's just such a hard. The Spirit's got to guide this kind of thing. It's just contextually. I would be cautious if you're like, hey, let's do the Bible and bourbon because people need to know that God's cool.
Yeah, that's weird.
God's cool, and like, I may not even care whether you sip a bourbon and read the scriptures at night, but like, there is a difference in like, hey, am I trying to attract people to God by the things that there is no moral law for? Now they get, oh, well, God's kind of cool. Maybe I'll be open to him being Lord of my life. Like, I guess I'd be cautious if that is how you're thinking about it. Not because it's not true. It's just that like, I don't know. I don't like that.
Now,
I don't like it.
To bring in something that may mean nothing here, but like just because I'm interested in thoughts on this. Alcohol was a very different thing back then. Like, they didn't have distilling. They didn't have like alcohol that was like 35% alcohol by volume. It's like 6 to 8% fermented grapes that gets wine. And so like, it took a lot more alcohol back then than it does now to get to a drunken perspective. You would have to really be hitting wine constantly over and over again to really get to that point. And to your point also, like, for a while, mead became a thing because it was seriously the cleanest thing to drink because alcohol, I mean, through that fermentation process, it was cleaned. Is there any perspective of like, we take the thought that like alcohol was okay in the Bible, so it's good now, very differently, because if you're drinking a glass of vodka, it is a very different thing than you drinking a glass of wine. You'll get hammered on a glass of vodka. A glass of wine will get you like, okay, I feel something because there's literally a chemical poison in my body right now, but it's not that big of a deal. Like, is that any part of this conversation, or am I just being a nerd bringing it up?
No. I think there is a relevance to that. Like, there's because think of it this way. Think of the wedding at Cana, right? What is the highlight? The festivities or the booze? The booze supports the festivities,
right? But the festivities is the deal.
What's freaking vodka? It's booze. It's booze forward.
Yeah.
You're saying
I want a vodka. It's booze forward. Yes. Going to the bars is not about the festivity. It's the fact that I can get access to an $11 Crown Royal.
Right. I'm here to drink alcohol. And
so like, there is a noticeable difference between like bourbon and Bible as a group of dudes to try to attract people to get there, and like bourbon and Bible at your house by yourself as you wind down at 9:30 at night and you're like, I'm taking in Colossians and I'm gonna drink this whatever.
This is the full thing I do.
Like, I just don't have any problem with it. Like, zero problem with it. I think this is where like we're inserting the word legalism where it doesn't actually even belong. Like, we're not talking about legalism as it pertains to the Bible. You're talking about legalism as it pertains to the church you grew up in, or something, right?
And he wasn't even legalistic about it. He didn't judge anybody who did it.
No.
But he was also a pastor of a church of 20,000 people, and it's like, I got 20,000 people looking at me if I'm posting on social media with me going, hey, Bible and bourbon, baby. He just wanted to stay away from that.
Yeah,
I think the thing is like, all that stuff is really hard because like in the right context, all these are beautiful gifts from God, right? And so like, you could legalistically say, hey, I don't want to have sexual temptation. I won't ever leave the house. I'll just stay here all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and because that's basically the protection you'd have to have. You'd have to throw away your phone, your TV, any connection with the outside world, because of like what God put together, like a sexual relationship. He's like, this is a gift to you, and it's a great gift, and I want you to enjoy it. But there's a temptation to use it wrongly, right? And so like, the legalistic route, as it keeps throwing in there, is like to abstain from the rest of the world because one small thing might happen, and we don't live that way, right? And the same thing comes true with alcohol. Is like, there's the legalistic route of saying, look, I won't ever touch it because it could possibly be a problem to me. I think that's pertinent, and that's not legalism. That is just good decision making.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like you're some kind of horrible law enforcer. You're just like, I don't know. It's the same reason that like people don't do a lot of things, to say, look, that it might get me in some trouble, and I'm just not interested in that. I like the thing that I have now, or the thing that I'm striving for, more than the thing that you're offering. I did the weigh and measure, and Mike Pence says, I don't go out to eat with women by myself. He did a weigh and measure. He's not a legalistic jerk. He's just a guy that said, I love my wife. I love my marriage, and I love the situation I'm in, and I just don't like any of this other stuff clouding it up.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely right. And there's just I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not legalism. Sometimes it's just good decision making.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't do a Hardee's ministry because that would be a problem for me, where it may not be for you.
Yeah. Should we meet at the all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet? Booba goes, no, you know what? No.
It's probably not a good place for me. I'm not going to meet you at a strip club,
tortillas.
and I'm not going to go to the Old Country Buffet to tell people about Jesus. I will go to the Hy-Vee salad bar, though.
Yes.
I wish they would open that Old Country Buffet back up again.
Oh,
I love it.
Think about your relationship with food.
You don't
and
have
how
to-
much you want that to happen, and then you look over here and you think about how much I want that to happen.
Isn't it better that I do it than you?
Yes, agreed. No,
Okay,
I'm just
then.
saying at the level of want.
Done.
Also, I like, just to tie a bow on that, just realize that we're talking about this in a perspective of people who are leading other people in ministry, right? Like, that is a different conversation. It's not wholly different. It's not completely different than regular old Joe Schmo taking an alcohol. But like if you have if you drink on a regular basis and it owns you, we're talking about you. This is a problem. You're following it around. If you drink on a regular basis and it doesn't own you, no one's looking to put like Jesus guilt on you about that, right? Like, whether it owns you or not. And on your better days, you'll be like, honestly, I think that might own me a little bit. Well, yeah, that's not what we're after. You're trying to get joy and peace from something that can't give it to you. And you've tried it the same way for years, and it continues not to work. And you're like, maybe this time. And it just doesn't do it, and you know it. And so, like, once again, not legalism, just good decision making.
Yeah.
After not drinking for well over 20 years, we introduced it into our home because our children were getting older, and I wanted them to see a balanced.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want it to be like a taboo. We're scared of it, because I wasn't scared of it. I just chose not to.
Yeah.
But they didn't know I wanted them to be able to see, because it was obviously they were getting to the point where their friends were drinking and doing stuff, and and I'm sure it was offered to them and all that stuff. And it's just like, I wanted them to see you can do it and in a disciplined way, and and you control it.
What are you drinking, Dan? Are you beer, wine,
Just
or
beer guy,
hard liquor?
Just beer. Okay. I'm kind of ignorant, honestly, on this stuff. Like, I don't know how to. It's easier to say I'll take a beer rather than I don't know the names of stuff.
Two fingers of Buffalo Trace.
Here's the thing. I was talking to another guy a couple weeks ago and said, like, I'm super cautious about not getting involved in like fancy beers and drinks, because like I'm so the guy who will buy all the new things at the gas station. And do you know how long it's going to take to get through all these variants? I'm like, I can't be involved in it.
No.
I have to do, like, I like this hot cider thing. I think I can do that. But and whatever the Irish cream is, what's the
Bailey's?
Oh, that is delicious.
You put that in things.
You should drink it straight.
You drink Bailey's straight.
800 pounds of glory. Anyway,
sweet Moses.
That's it. The stuff that tastes
goes
like
into Guinness for a Irish car bomb, man. That's crazy.
candy. Okay, you're listening to Live from the Path. Hey, I don't know. Here's the thing. I think you could fall. There's not even two sides here, but you could fall on either side of that, and I could be like, "Yep, could be." Like, which I think which means you just take the whole thing in correctly, take it in rightly.
I was gonna say,
yeah. And so, I would be cautious by if you feel like personally you land so heavy on one thing. It's okay if it's true for you, but don't overprescribe your personal context onto things that Jesus has said and that the Bible otherwise directs or doesn't direct. Your context may be different, and if you like we talked about last week, if you want the Bible to be a rule book, you're going to read it differently than taking it in for what it actually is, which does include some moral guidelines, but is not the same thing as a list of do's and don'ts. And so just read it in a healthy way.
right.
You're listening to Live from the Path. Booba, you got to ask the pastor.
So in my Bible reading the last week, I have I finished Job, and because we talked about Job last week, and I made my way into Proverbs. And so I think I did 11 through 15 today because I'm doing about 5 chapters a day, which is a very interesting thing in Proverbs versus some other books. Because, like, if you're getting 5 chapters of a story, that's one thing. If you're getting 5 chapters of Proverbs, you've read roughly 285 sayings.
Yes.
And so I might have to revisit that as I continue through, because I'm about halfway and it's just been like, okay, I don't think I'm paying attention to this the way that I should be. But a question popped in my head as I started reading through Proverbs of, why is this here? Because I don't ask that question when I'm justifying any other book, like including Psalms and Ecclesiastes and Songs of Solomon and stuff like that. Like, I just don't find myself in a place where I'm going, why is this even here? Like, you've got your history, you've got your identity pieces of who God is, you've got your pieces of what is the kingdom through Christ and what is living in the church and after Christ that gets through the New Testament, things like that. But here I've got 31 chapters that are wise sayings and personifications of both wisdom and folly, and then some stuff at the end by Lemuel. And I'm just wondering, knowing that Solomon was at least the curator of a lot of this and the originator of a lot of it, knowing that Solomon prayed at the beginning of his reign for wisdom and very famously received a large amount of it as he asked God for it, and then does this piece. But why is it here in my Bible? What is it telling me from the perspective of, like, what am I learning about the identity of my God through these sayings? Because there's a lot of them that do make sense about, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And it goes on to explain what the fear of the Lord is through practical nature. And then some that talk about how to be not a sluggard in your daily dealings, and then some with how to handle accounts correctly or how to handle fault from a neighbor correctly. But, like, if I'm thinking right now where I am, what am I supposed to get from this as it pertains to my God? And then in the context of when it was written, when it was compiled, and when it was, placed to be a book of sayings for Israel, what were they getting from that? Was it meant to be just things to ponder? Was it another thing where it's like, this is not necessarily a legalistic book of laws like the covenants that God set for his people, but generally, hey, do you want to figure out some ways to be right and good and wise?
I think that this was Solomon, we'll say God, putting out like tweetable tweets before Twitter was cool. Short little clips, right? Or memes, just think of a picture in the background of a woman on a roof with a leaky faucet. And you're like, oh, yeah. And it was just little, why do we do memes today? Because it's just a little clever thing and it sticks with you. And hope, doesn't mean you've maybe radically changed your life on it, but it might give you some direction and some wisdom. And that's just a collection of all these memes that he had on social media back in the when was that, around 2500? I don't even know. I haven't done my dating lately.
Yeah, right.
1100 or no, even there's farther along than that.
Yeah,
BC.
Yeah.
So anyway, a while back. So it's first generation memes and
it's essentially what they would have had sitting on their desk of the cat hanging from the tree.
Exactly.
Saying, hang in there, baby.
You read stuff today and he'll tweet this, and what do they say now? Exit? I don't know.
And so,
oh yeah.
As you know, this is why I'm asking the pastor, as it pertains to, like, is this a similar book to, like, reading the prophets among the people? Like, was this just passed as like excerpts that someone would say, or hey, this is a wise saying of Solomon in Proverbs? Like, how is this used practically by Israel? Like, what are they doing with these things?
Yeah, I think that is the right way to think about it. And the troublesome question is, like, some of these bits of wisdom, you're like, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Some of them, like, I think there's a cultural thing there that I'm just not getting.
That don't seem right. Yeah. And so here's actually, let me ask you a question back.
Yeah, please.
Jesus style. Why wouldn't it be in the Bible?
And I appreciate you asking that, because that has been, as I've thought about it, the flip of it of what am I, and it actually goes back to the conversation we were just having of like, how am I reading my Bible? Am I looking to it as a legalistic list of do's and don'ts? Mm-hmm. If I am, then Proverbs feels really weird. If I am, it makes a lot of sense, because it's like, well, this is the extended do's and don'ts. You've got the law, and then you've got, well, make sure you're not a sluggard, and make sure you're not all these things. But like, if I'm not thinking of it that way, and I'm thinking about my Bible as an expression of the living Word of God, as He allows His identity to be shown through these books and through these writings and the living Word, right? I struggle with that even more then, because like I don't know how to take these in.
Okay, so a couple things to ponder. I would actually, one of the books you mentioned is even more difficult. Like, what is Song of Songs doing?
It's just like love poems,
right? Is there anything in there that tells me something that I otherwise did not know factually?
No,
I don't think so.
No,
it's not a core piece of theology that you can tie back to Song of Songs. However, it upends how you think about God, like the character of God and how He sees His relationship with the world. Like it fulfills something that like we would be. It feels scandalous to even think about, for God to relate to people in that way as a picture, right? And so it tells me something, right?
Yeah.
So again, a Song of Songs is not a rule book at all. Like, it's not telling me it's not saying do this, don't do this. Like, we like to go, I'm supposed to delight in my wife's breasts. Okay, I mean, go ahead. But like, it's not a rule that says if you do not delight in them today,
exactly, yes,
it's a problem. So I also want you to think about, move to the Psalms and think about David's imprecatory prayers. When he's praying against, bash their heads on the rocks.
Yes, right.
Is that the word of God saying what David said is correct? You should pray that people have their heads bashed on the rocks and their children killed and whatever. No, it's again, the Psalms are not necessarily or not always a prescription on this is right. It is a reflection of things that David is praying.
And his relationship to God.
It's correct. And oftentimes you'll see things that are happening, and this is where people that contest with the Bible sometimes contest with it wrong. There's plenty of things you want to haggle with God about, go ahead. But sometimes they're like, it's in the Bible, I can't believe God affirmed that. I'm like, God didn't affirm that. It just exists.
Right.
It's a thing that happened.
Yeah.
And so like, I am not uncomfortable at all looking at the Proverbs and going, God gave wisdom to this man.
Yes, right.
They collected the wisdom of this man.
Yep.
Some of that wisdom, I don't have any particular reason to go, yes, God ordained that wisdom.
Right.
God ordained, it is collected. We do have a vision of how Solomon sees the world. Some of the things, the way that Solomon is talking, you actually get some deeper wisdom by watching him, the things that you know that happened in his life.
Right. That's
and the
what
things
I was
that
gonna say.
he said that have nothing to do with the relationship with God necessarily.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Now, I also don't have a problem with practical wisdom being available in God's word. Are we not living?
Right.
Do I not have to live a human life? Do I not run into human circumstances and problems and things where, like, if another man who has gone through some of these things has wisdom in how it's like, what's our show? Is that now we're not scripture, right? But like, you would go, oh, well, that's interesting to hear how people facing these same types of things have gone through it. Just like it's interesting to see ways that David has done it without otherwise having to say it's God's prescription on how it is to be done.
Right. And that's fair. And I think that one of the pieces that I was trying to think through was we have, I mean, there's accounts in, Chronicles and Samuel and Kings that talk about books that are not a part of the Bible, right? Like there are accounts of wars that are happening and kings that are going on and things like that are talked about within biblical scripture, but are not considered to be a part of biblical scripture. And as I'm thinking about that, knowing that this is not the sole source of literature culturally or within the world at this time, as a matter of fact, it's a very small sampling of what actually was either passed on oral history or was being written and compiled. Why is it that something like this made its way into what essentially I'm going to call the final cut of the 66 books that we consider to be the Holy Scriptures of God, versus it being something along the lines of, but did Solomon not speak to that within his book of Proverbs or within the compilation of his wise sayings?
Yeah.
But then have it be an extra biblical thing that is a cultural and societal writing or compilation of sayings that exists that wouldn't be a part of the holy text that we consider to be the compiled Bible of the 66 books that we have.
I don't know that it's a necessary distinction.
And that's fair.
Right. Like, what do we have? Like the Torah, for what it is it's largely a historical document.
Exactly right.
About God's interaction with people. It tells me things about people. It tells me things about God.
That was not originally written down at all.
That's right. Right. It's an oral history, right? Could you chuck that off and say, or actually take 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Samuel, right? Chronicles. Could you go, well, this is history of Israel stuff? Of course. Most of it is. You could go through the whole book of Samuel, and there's not actually there are very few things of which you meditate on and go, this is for me.
Right, yes.
These are battles. God, will you hand them over? Yes, he will. God, will you hand them over? No, he won't.
Yeah. Is this person selected by God? Great. Did they do something awful? Yes, they did.
Right. It's a history that so it's interesting. So think of it like if you were to follow God's people around for 1,000 years and every once in a while you took a Polaroid. Right?
Right. Yes.
It is a cataloging of an interaction between God and people of which we are made privy to. This gets interesting. Is that like are some of the book of the Jewish wars or like the book of the Jasher or like whatever the other things that are mentioned? Are we missing it? Should I think that my scriptures are incomplete because it's not there? No, because
I don't think so.
Not because it may not be very, very similar to 2nd Chronicles. God did not make sure that was retained.
Right.
I don't care.
Yep.
Right. I don't now, but we shouldn't necessarily think that they are of a wholly different substance. That book of Jasher may be the exact same thing as 2nd Chronicles. Mm-hmm. It's a picture of God's interaction with his people,
right,
largely through Jewish history. Oh, he saved something. He made sure that the church had something as a reference. I don't feel like I'm missing something, but I also don't have any reason to believe that like those books are wholly different from as a thing that they're trying to solve.
Right.
And so, but do I trust that God made sure that when we look at something that has been codified and that we're working with the same thing, do I trust that God handled that? Well, if I trust that he led the person to write it, the information to be retained, then I trust that it's been codified in such a way that I don't sweat it.
Yeah.
But I think we got to be cautious about over-prescribing. Did 2nd Chronicles fall from heaven? No, he had people remember it over hundreds of years, and then a dude wrote it down.
There was a giant kingdom that was keeping track of the things that was happening, and as the kingdom was being established through all of these battles and all of these pieces that were essentially coming from God's chosen family and people as he was revealing himself to the world and giving them his name to carry and his standard to walk with.
Yeah. Yes, agreed. So I think it's actually a very interesting question because like we should be able to probe that because what I'm saying my life should be based upon this giant book.
Right.
I think that's ultimately a little bit wrong way to frame it. Like it is a revealing. It's a revealing of God's interaction with his people. It's a story of him, his creation, how he interacts with it, its redemption. Not every story is a prescription on how you should behave. Not every story reflects humans in the way that they should. I'd say there's a good chunk of the stories that are in those history books that God is not even particularly condoning how people have behaved. Right? But it is what happened.
Yes.
It reveals how people think. What I was thinking of, think about the stories Twice, someone took a vengeful act on David's behalf. Mm-hmm. I killed the guy who killed this guy, right? Or the guy. Remember the second dude? Saul says, "Kill me," and the guy does it, and then he tells David, and David goes, "What were you thinking?"
Yeah,
and then he kills that guy.
Yes, right.
And you're like, "Well, I mean, Saul told him to," and so like these are.
Isn't his armor? No, not armor.
But
killed him.
But here's what happens though: like you don't get the voice of God that shows up and sorts it out for you and go, David was correct. He should have done that. Or like
a Morgan Freeman narrator there,
right? Or David should have taken it easy on this guy. He was just doing what his king told him to. He doesn't show up in the narrative like that.
No.
And so if the Bible were like a prescriptive moral code in all the places that we're looking for it, I would have expected God to insert himself in places but he doesn't. And so it's weird because if you're hearing me talk about this, I'm trying to make the case to you that Scripture is not as easy as you think, but is also not as complicated as you're going to try to make it be. Let it is what it is. It is a preserved codification of the interaction between God and his people and God and humanity as a whole over time that reveals things about him and about us. And you should accept it as that. But like anytime we try to box it in any further than that, I think you start to run risks.
So let me ask you a bigger question then, if it's okay to do so. Because as I've tried to understand my Bible and have tried to understand scriptures like Proverbs and like Song of Songs or Song of Solomon or whatever it is, I think one of the questions that I've always asked myself, and I thought was trying to be an astute studier or being studious as I go through and learn about my God, has always been the question of where is Jesus in this text? And not necessarily from the perspective of like, I don't see his name, but I should feel his hands here, right? Like I don't feel necessarily that far from it, but like as I'm understanding the larger narrative of my Bible of creation, fall, God redeeming people through a long woven story of a peoples that he decided to be his bear his name, right? Then through lineage and persecution and exile and all these different moves, prophecy, stories that lead towards this Jesus that is the fulfilling of his ultimate covenants, all of the ones that he decided that he put upon us, and then this Jesus taking on all of the curses of each one of these covenants so that God can redeem the relationship with us. And then how do we act as people in the kingdom after that redemption has happened? And after that covenant has been fulfilled, the curses have been taken on by Christ, we were never actually subject to the consequences that for generation upon generation God said you will be subject to these consequences. How am I to take a book like Proverbs or Song of Songs and am I asking the right question in looking towards how is this leading me to God? How is this leading me to Jesus? Am I asking that is that a wrong question to ask? Am I circling the right thought? Am I, many other things?
Yeah, and then you feel free to jump in whenever you want. But like I would say, I think we misunderstand Scripture if we're looking for salvation in every piece of it.
Fair, okay.
And which is interesting because like I have the ESV Study Bible. And it's got at every part of the introduction of every book, it's got history of salvation. And so, but it stretches. It's stretching on Proverbs. It's stretching on Song of Solomon. I can only
imagine,
yeah. Here's what I think is true, though. It's cyclical in my mind, or at least bidirectional. People, I think, if you started with the Old Testament, contextually, it helps you understand what Jesus is doing. Right? Does it mean that every story has Jesus in it? No. Does it mean that every story is pointing you to your need for rescue and salvation? No, because God is not complete. He's not impractical. He created you to live on the earth. His whole focus isn't to have his relationship with you just so it can be somewhere else outside of the earth. He created a good earth and he said it was good. And so there's a practicality to it that I think we obfuscate by looking for salvation at every reference. It's just not there. However, I would also say that contextually, if you started with Jesus, you understand it's his need. You understand what he's doing. You understand it deeper of what he's after by watching the human struggle in his absence.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think there's a right thing that goes, how in light of Jesus, how do I understand what I just read? How does it shift and change the things that Solomon is struggling with? Would it be different with the knowledge of Jesus? Would it shift? I think it's a healthy exercise because it helps you understand Jesus better.
Right.
But I do think it is too narrow to look for Jesus under every rock and under every verse. I think it's not particularly helpful, and I think actually it sometimes covers up the things we're supposed to understand about humans, or even about the direction of Yahweh's interaction with his people, because it stands on its own, right?
Yeah.
Early Jews they understand Jesus because they understand their Old Testament, and so it's not to overuse the word, but it's a privileged position to go, Jesus is under every rock. I think, as a fulfilling of the narrative, it reopens and deepens what you read, but it doesn't mean that it's hiding everywhere. I don't know, Dan, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that the idea comes from an overly clever preacher trying to put Jesus in every text. As Jesus is in Genesis, blah, 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 and then they go through the thing, and it's just like, but no. Everything bends it. It's
and I've fallen into that. I've definitely been in a place where, as I'm teaching, I've tried to be like, where are we finding Jesus in this piece? Where, there's years ago. Now I would look at that and go, I don't really know if that's the important narrative that I thought it was at the time.
Yeah, like some people say Song of Solomon is all about Jesus, and I'm like, no, it was a guy who was married,
right,
and just liked the boobs. I mean, it's he was
excited about a beautiful relationship that God allowed him to have through
creation. He just happened to have 900 of them. I mean, he's.
Is that right?
So that's the truth.
I mean,
well, now, so take, for example, the guys from the Bible Project will say we believe that Scripture is a unified story that points to Jesus. I agree with that.
Yeah. Right, and I think that's still fair. Yes.
But that's not the same thing as every cut up section in every chapter of a book go, how is Jesus in here? I'm like, he's not. In fact, his absence is a real problem in this area.
God's not even mentioned in Ruth.
That's a very interesting way to put that. Yeah, absolutely. Because you can get caught in some serious lengthy position or parts of your Old Testament where you're like, I appreciate what's happening here, but we're on chapter 3 of straight. These are the singers. And these are the ones who play this instrument and stuff like that. And naturally there's a larger narrative of what did that mean culturally from the perspective of these are God's peoples and this is the stuff that they're doing as a part of their daily life, being within this group of people that are identified by Yahweh, right? But I don't know if I'm going to read through a list of flutists and go, man, Jesus really is present here. Flautists, whatever. Sorry.
Here's what I would say. I was just making a flautas joke, like the Mexican.
I know.
Mexican food.
I'm the only person here you don't explain that.
I love me a flauta. So here's my encouragement to you is you're going to find, not just you, but in general.
Got it.
As you go through your scripture reading, you're going to come across a lens every so often, and you're like, wow, that really opens up the place.
Yeah.
You should embrace that, but embrace it as a yes and, to steal from my boss at work. It's a yes and. Yes. Do these things point to Jesus? Yes. And also probably something else.
Right.
And, oh, wow, I've never thought about curses. It's really blowing my mind. Yes, maybe. And it also probably points you to Jesus. And it's also a lesson in human ignorant behavior.
Yeah, right.
And
it has to have context in that piece too.
Yes. There's not one key that unlocks the depths of Scripture. You're going to find lenses that are just going to keep making it deeper and deeper, and embrace that without making it feel like it has to be so singular and restrictive. I think there's no reason to box God in and box Scripture in that way. Be open to I was looking 10 years ago, I was thinking about this and it blew my mind. And then now I saw this and now it's reopening up. Yes. And still the other thing that blew your mind. And something else 5 years from now. Praise God for it. Cuts like an onion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the world was created in California. And ever since California went down the tubes, God says, I'm gonna have you start driving this car towards New York. Right? The arc of the trip is to get you to New York across the whole United States.
Ticket to ride. It's gonna be 10 trains.
You're gonna ticket to ride to the United States, or all the way across the United States to New York.
Yeah.
And that's where the vindication is going to be found. But along the way, you're going to have to go through Idaho and Montana and Iowa and whatever. And it would be a misunderstanding of the trip to go, Iowa is a long road to New York.
Okay.
The mountains found in Montana are the mountains of New York, right? You've basically boiled the trip down to its end and what it's pointing to, and it's all good and right because that is the direction that the biblical narrative is pointing to. Yeah. We have a fall where humanity couldn't cut it, and God says, I have to provide a rescue. So this is the roadmap to the rescue, but that does not mean that God is not present and there's not things happening, and even the rest stop in the middle of Illinois can't stand on its own as being significant. It's just not the overarching direction.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Good example. Okay. All right. Asked and answered. Let's. Hey, do you have any questions for Ask the Pastor? Hit us up at the Live from the Path complaint line.
Okay.
The Live from the Path complaint line.
I thought of some quick questions.
Okay.
One. Did God ever actually talk to David?
Did God talk to David?
Yes. Well, there are places where I think it's ambiguous because God would say, he would ask the ephod. He would ask of the ephod, or he would say, God, will you deliver this to me? And it'll say God's response was blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't particularly say
through a prophet
how he answered and in what way he answered. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any, not Proverbs. Yeah. Are there any Proverbs that directly go against biblical law?
There are, yes. I'd have to look. There are proverbs that are at least contentious with each other.
Yep.
I'd have to look it up. Maybe let's pick that up, like contentious proverbs for 200.
Okay.
Next week.
Yeah, and I can do that. I'm literally reading it every day. So.
Okay.
Also, it occurred to me that like we were talking about lenses, that like the book of Proverbs, anything involving David and the Song of Solomon, all provide like very different aspects of places that you like. If you're just reading the Mosaic Law, it's very dry, right? Like it's very black and white. And then the human experience is not that way. And then here comes like David. He's a highly emotional character, right? He has huge swaths of up and down and laments and celebrations and whatever. And like here comes this character that you like. Up to that point, it was basically stories like here's what happened, and then like David seems to bring in a lot of emotion into it. And like that's a lot of the Psalms are that way. And then the Proverbs are like straight wisdom. It's not here's the law, it's here's the interpretation of what the output might look like in your life, right? And so like here's how that would start to filter through. And then you get like the Ecclesiastes guy who's like kind of the same vein, but he's kind of
It's all smoke.
he's a real downer. Like he's a real critic of things, But anyway, like if you put all those books together, like especially in the way that they're presented to us, like it just brings a very dimensional way of Yahweh's interaction both with the world and then the human experience living on God's creation, like of how it's just got a lot of depth to it.
Yeah.
And without those books, I don't know that you would have the same, like sometimes like you feel like, even as you're walking as a Christian, you're like, it shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel so dejected or so frustrated or so like my life is not going the way that it should. And then like you have the biblical example of David, who's like, I'm calling your name and you are nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And like it's almost like a small bolster of like, well, David struggled with the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not so far out of line here, Like it needs to be corrected. Like the course gets corrected throughout David's life in most ways, but like still, like without those words of comfort or wisdom in there, like you're just missing on like a huge part of God's character and your own, where he's saying, look, I know you're going to struggle in this way. Yep. Like a guy after my own heart struggled in this way.
Yep.
So be comforted, son, that I know that this is part of the fallen world that you're currently living in.
Yeah. Okay. You're listening to Live from the Path. Again, if you haven't asked the pastor, it's Live from the Path. Bob Eisner, complaint line 515-517-0085. You can call or send a text or an emoji or an animated Giphy, or however you communicate with the world. We can take it in at the Live from the Path, 515-517-0085. We'd love to be able to hear from you. Let's give out some advice.
Don't send us a Giphy.
Send me a Giphy.
Okay, ready? Dear Live from the Path.
Hello.
My husband has, for years, felt the need to talk filthy and ask sexual questions of other women.
Whoa.
Of
It
other
bothers
women.
me something terrible.
To them?
Yeah. He's upset that I ruin his quotes fun, and he insists he isn't hurting anyone, that he likes he likes being the life of the party. We have fought over this for years, and I'm exhausted from it. I told him I don't see the need for him to do this, and he continues to tell me I need to quit being so unreasonable. I don't know what to do, and I'm ready to just give up. It doesn't make me love or respect him. I actually loathe him when he does. Please help. Repelled in Iowa.
That's not
In our
Cheryl,
own
is it?
backyard, boys.
This is happening here.
Oh, dear.
Okay. So this fella's making like sexual comments towards other ladies at parties?
He's the perv of the party.
No one thinks he's the life of the
Correct.
party.
Everyone thinks he's the creep of the party
This
and
is
wishes he wasn't around.
This is where Bob Russell has the thing nailed. This guy's
That's
been
right.
drinking.
Yeah. He talks filthy and asks sexual questions.
No one's impressed.
No.
Okay.
Stop it.
I've met a few fellas like this. All right. They're gross.
We're
Yeah.
talking to you, Chad.
Yeah. Chad, you're gross.
Not you, but we're talking to a Dan. Okay. Not the Dan in this room, but there's a Dan.
Okay.
And I wish Dan watched this show so he could know that I'm talking about him, admittedly.
This is you.
There's
I will talk to
Dan.
him.
Dan, I'm talking to you. You're terrible and creepy, and nobody likes what it is.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I'm interested. It doesn't really matter that much what the person's age is that does this, because like I've only met that kind of social creepy person that's either like 60 plus fella that like, I don't know if he was like military guy or whatever surroundings, like whatever you want to call it, or like creepy college dude that like is this way as well.
Yeah.
But like creepy college dude is definitely not harmlessly doing this for sure, because they're just trying to see how many avenues that they can walk down. Creepy old guy may just be trying to relive a life that he used to live of like promiscuity or whatever. Regardless of the reasoning, everyone is uncomfortable by it.
Yeah.
And the people that aren't uncomfortable by it and are buying into it are hurt people that they think that that's the only worth that they have. That's the bigger deal for me, is the fact that if you can get people at this party to buy into your filthy talk and being gross and blah, 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 one, they don't respect themselves. Two, they don't respect you. Three, they don't respect your marriage.
And they're lying to him. Yeah.
And like it's all hevel. It's all smoke. It's vapor. It's fleeting.
Like the guy that shows up on the news once in a while who like thinks it's really a good idea to take a picture of his penis and send to some girl, and then she's like, I don't want to see that.
Right.
Like, what makes you think I want to see that? I mean,
no part of that geometry makes me happy, buddy.
yeah. And he's like, no, they want to see this. It's like, no, they don't. They don't want to hear your crap. They don't want to see your pictures. They don't want to. Just stop it.
Unless they're a medical professional and you are showing them that you have a problem, stop it.
Yeah.
And even in that situation, it's most likely not that. Yeah. And if you know a friend who's a nurse, that's not an acceptable situation. Go to the doctor.
I feel like dudes would definitely do this. Hey, do you see something wrong on here? Does that look different to you?
So you think it's all right? Yeah. Okay.
No, that's perfect.
So look, here's the problem, though, is like he's not saying, hey, is this acceptable? Everybody seems to love it. His wife is asking what to do about this dude.
She obviously can't do it. She's tried. But I mean,
that's the sad part, is the fact that she's had this conversation multiple times to the point that she has to categorize that she loathes this person because of this. Of course you do.
It's not a leavable offense or anything. But you maybe just don't go with him.
You'd stop going for starters.
Wait a minute. You said it's not a what offense?
You don't leave the marriage on it. I said leavable.
I got what you meant.
You know what I meant. Yeah.
Mike, does this feel... You're making a face, Mike. Do you feel as though this is a leavable offense? Is there a contention amongst the room?
Do you want me to say it that way?
I'm gonna have to think about this, because here's the thing: it's like there's zero honoring, of that woman in that marriage, and I get that, and like that is a line. I just have a hard time believing that he's not engaged in other things. Like that would,
or at least wants to be.
Yeah,
I think he's just a loudmouth perv. I mean,
he's probably
he
super insecure. Funny. He's probably like hates himself, and this is the avenue that he evolves in it.
He's Rodney Dangerfield, who's a pervert.
There's 100 reasons why someone could act this way, and not a single one of them is justified.
Yeah. Right.
So this is hard, right? Because you can't give out generalized advice because it depends on the players in the room, right? So like this situation came up in our group of friends. Like I think we would just go, I'll go talk to him.
Right.
It's no problem. Yeah, we'll go straighten this out a little bit. At least we get to say everything that you're afraid to say or don't feel like it'll create a situation. Like a good, strong fellow in your life that goes, look, man, this is ridiculous.
Let me ask this. Okay, I feel like this has come up in advice before, but I don't remember where we landed. Is it inappropriate for the wife to approach one of his friends?
That's what I was wondering.
To ask for help?
Yeah.
No.
Or even get the whole group. If it's intimate friends together, just say, hey, guys, can we just be honest here for a second?
Yeah.
Is this uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Embarrass him. I mean, he's not listening. But they got to be honest.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with this, actually. I think if I was doing something and I was being stubborn or pigheaded, and my wife went to one of you guys and said, hey, can you talk? I'm struggling with this. Can you go talk to Ben? I would be like, if I was in my right mind, I would be okay with that.
Right? Yeah. Of course.
Oh yeah.
I would be just fine.
Same.
Well, even eventually you would be. Even if you're not in your right mind, you would eventually go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, that's right.
In the presence of a church community here, this gets solved by church fellas talking to fellas.
Yeah.
Right.
In the absence of that situation, it sounds like you can talk to friends and ask them to cover that piece and go, hey, like, you know, Don's doing some creepy stuff, and like I've tried to talk to him many times, and I hate it so much. He won't listen to me.
Does she talk to the wives or to their husbands? That's the question. Like, hey, talk to the wife to talk to their husband, or
I wouldn't have a problem with my wife going directly to one of my friends.
Yeah.
I think it can be risky.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's an embarrassing for her too, right? Like this is embarrassing that your
Yeah,
husband's
it is.
acting like a complete jerk.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I'm cautious there. I think maybe it'd be better to do again if you said for what. Look, I'm not coming anymore, and I'm not coming to the parties when you're acting like this. Here's exactly why I'm not coming. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me, and I'm not doing it. If that does not have any reaction, I think it's okay to stage what in effect feels like an intervention,
Right?
And let the rest of his friends and speak to it. And frankly, if they back him, you're just kind of hosed.
Like, I would say, how did the husbands not know about this? Aren't they hearing it?
Was that
maybe
the context?
Maybe he talks
or was
to
this...
the ladies, and so
It seems like that's the deal. Yeah, that's what I took from
Corners
it.
him
Was that
alone
he
by
was
the
like,
punch bowl. Hey,
I don't like.
you want a
Well,
real
maybe
punch?
it's women that are not associated with.
That's
your
what I was
friend
about to
group or
say
whatever.
too. Yeah, exactly. It could just be ladies at a party, and he just goes up to him and be like,
we're assuming.
"Notice you went with the slim black dress tonight, baby."
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine any husband worth of salt would allow some loudmouth drunk to like start yapping off,
Right.
Cutting that off
filthy
pretty
crap to
darn
their
quick.
wife. Yeah. Here's the thing: he's probably long overdue for a whooping. I don't know how he's avoided one all these years. Honestly, I don't know that like as far as the advice to the wife goes, I think you're right. Like to navigate this well, I would normally like if I wanted to go talk to Ben's wife, like it was just going to be her and I talking, I would just text him, "Hey man, I need to stop by and talk to your wife for a minute." Like I do that all the time.
Right.
Like every random person that I like, if I need to talk to like another female like on their own, I always just text their
Bring
husband.
your wife.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's just a built-in whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So, and I think you can have the conversation and to not like gossip or like have to unnecessarily embarrass yourself in front of a bunch of people, right? Like, I think that's all fine. I just think it's just good practice to give a heads up.
Yeah, I would say that like don't feel like you do not have to dishonor yourself because he like to match his dishonoring of you. And so it's perfectly fine to not go. It's perfectly fine not to go down to his level. I think you got to be cautious not to be overly punitive. Like he's a child, and so like, without being like, I don't want you to dominate over your husband, but you do have access to your man in a way that no one else does, and so like it's okay to be very clear with your spouse. These are the things that like I love about you, I enjoy. Here's the things that I do not. Your spouse should be able to refine you in that way, and so try not to punish him outside of the bounds of the thing that's causing the problem. Like if he goes to a party and that you didn't attend, the punishment was that you did not attend. You don't withhold sex and sandwiches for the next 2 weeks in consequence to it. Like I'd be careful that he doesn't cause you to stumble because he's being a moron. However, I think it's perfectly fine that you can guard yourself in such a way that says, I will not, I'm not going to follow you down this crass and ugly hole.
Secular's advice?
Boova's pondering whether she should withhold sex and sandwiches.
No, not at all. Okay. No,
At least not sandwiches.
Yeah, no, definitely not sandwiches. No, it's interesting because like as I'm trying to think through what I would say to this person who's asking us, for advice. My advice to someone that's not in the church is very different than my advice to someone that's within the church, right? That has a relationship with Christ, because from the perspective of I have a relationship and like my father or my husband and I are Christ following and are within the kingdom, stuff like that. There's really two offenses here. There's the offense between you and your husband that is important to talk about, but there's also the offense between your husband and his father, his king. Like there's a sin problem here as well. It's not just the affronting between you and him in the relationship. There's a disconnection that sin causes that is also a part, and to be not necessarily harsh, but trying to be truthful is more important. That is the disconnect between him and his God than the disconnect between you and him. And like that's the thing that needs addressing for sure. Whether that's by you within the marriage of being open to your husband and recognizing that, like, hey, like this is a problem because there's lustful sin and desire behind this that we need to talk about, on top of the fact that you're dishonoring me in our marriage. And that also bringing that to a church community to go, like, not only am I being affronted as the wife of a man who is very clearly lusting, or whatever realm you want to call it when it comes to these kind of lewd comments and things like that, but like, there is a person who is openly sinning and rebelling here that needs to have that brought to heel as well. And that's a bigger part of the conversation of, you may not look at me and go, this is super important every time that I tell you I don't want you to do this because it's making me uncomfortable. But you are sinning against your God openly, and that's the more important piece that you need to get your heart to align to. That's what you need to bring to heel, and that's what we need to keep most certainly focused on. And hitting that like a a comet to it with prayer and with running to God with this kind of stuff. Because this kind of sin is, it's just poison. It is absolutely internal poison. And yeah, so that's what I was pondering to say.
Secular says, it's sad that your husband would continue to do something he knows embarrasses you. You can't change him, so it's time to change the way you react to his outrageous behavior. Try ignoring him and distancing yourself when it happens. It would be interesting to know how his questions affect the women he's asking. Do they consider him to be the life of the party or just a possible drunken bore? Because you have already talked to him until you're blue in the face, start talking to them. Perhaps if you present a united front, he will stop.
Okay, I did think the reason I was laughing is I thought of the situation where he goes up and tells something crass or something, and then she just immediately hands them like a card or something that says, "Can you fill this out and tell me? Just fill it out. Do you feel like your name, first name, and do you feel comfortable?"
What was your reaction to that?
And just like follow the guy around, and then just continue to build evidence next to him.
Would you like to report this?
Yeah, you're creeping him out. Hey, I heard what you just said. This is my husband. I'm embarrassed of him. I thought that was crass and wrong. Can you fill this out real quick? I'm collecting evidence. He doesn't seem to believe this is a problem.
And that's bull crap. He knows it's a problem.
Oh, of course he does.
He thinks it's hilarious.
He just right, exactly right. He thinks
either that or
he
he's
thinks
just
funny.
freaking casting a wide net, trying to make something happen. Or trying to feel something and be fulfilled with this.
I think he wouldn't be able to handle it if something happened.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's most of the dudes in the world with their braggadocio, stupid comments.
Yeah.
And then if a good-looking lady turned for 5 seconds and goes, "Okay, man, let's get together."
Yeah. You're a dog chasing a car, and you have no idea what to do when you get it.
He'd wet himself.
That is the number one cure for me. If I'm having like a problem some day and I'm like, "Hey, baby," I think, okay, what if she says yes? I'm like, well, I have no intention. No.
Yeah, right.
So I kind of like, never mind.
No, this is weird.
Yeah.
Ooh, harlot.
How dare you, Jezebel? Get away.
I'm married.
That's right.
I know what you've birthed Babylon from. Get out of here.
I'm not attracted to ladies who would respond to my cat calls.
Exactly. I just like to assume you all love me.
My life is an ironic conundrum.
That is funny, right? Because like so many dudes who got like they talk this big game. They're they're not only looking or like fantasizing about things that they were never capable, like would never cross their paths, but they're also imagining themselves as a different person actually doing it because they have zero like swagger to pull
You are not Rico
it off.
Suave grabbing the lady in a Fabio book. Like it's not happening.
I don't know how many times that like I don't know. I get a new pair of pants or something. Or I got a haircut, something like that, and I get put all this stuff on, and I look in the mirror and I go, "Oh, well then, that's humbling."
Yeah.
I really thought these three things that just happened might have really upped this game, but it did not.
See, my problem is I don't go, "Oh crap, that didn't work." I go, "This is what the Lord made today."
Yeah. Go hide your wives. Oh, Boo is leaving the house.
I get a haircut and I'm like, "Ooh, Lord, you put some pizzazz on it today." That's what you did.
Okay, last one.
Yep.
Dear Life from the Past. My daughter is the youngest kid in the neighborhood, and a girl up the street treats her horribly. She calls her a baby, tells her she's not a person, and sends her home when everybody plays at her house. The other kids are friendly with my daughter, and when they come to play at our house, the mean girl comes too. She's never mean to my daughter when I'm around, but I don't think it's right to let her enjoy our pool and games when she won't let my daughter play at her house. How do I ask her to leave without seeming like a bully while allowing the other kids to stay and play? The other mother is of no help.
Okay, this is weird as it juxtaposes against the previous set of advice. Yeah. Because the question is that like dirty old crass man, you have a reckoning and you say, "I hold you accountable."
You should know better.
Yes.
Yeah. 8-year-old child.
The question with this girl, now, I mean, if the description is to be believed, she obviously has control of it if she doesn't do it around the mom. But it doesn't mean like the type of kid who's like cruel in such a way and manipulative about it, and to a mom who does not care. That tells you something,
Right?
And so, like, it is my belief, and this is a little bit of Ben's 21st century to 20 blindness here, but like, I do believe people will live up to your expectations of them if you can encourage them to do so. Like most people are far more inclined to live up to a good version of themselves that you seem to believe than they are to be rightly rendered and judged upon and expect to bounce back under their own accord. I think that's true with people who don't have nefarious intent, but who are products of their environment or ignorance.
Yeah.
Those people will live up to like, it's just, I don't know if you guys ever had this, but like someone who just seems to see you in a light that is way better than you know. Like, you know, you're like, I'm not that. I know I'm not. How have I fooled this person? But when they're in the room, you tend to live up to the thing that they believe about you. You like, oh, he's such a nice boy. He always compliments. And then you walk into the room to this lady the next time you see her, and you find yourself complimenting things better than you would 2 hours ago because someone thought up of you.
That's my marriage.
Yes. There it is. And is this why you act like a real raccoon in here? It's because we're not doing the same thing?
Yeah, you guys don't hold me to a higher standard. You normally break me down.
Yes. Okay. All right. It's not working, Mike. We got to change our ways of moving.
We're like 15 years into this.
Anyway.
Oh, has this changed the way we talk to the perv then?
No,
absolutely not. No, because
well,
you're
then
gonna
whatever.
I'm trying to think.
change the way we're going to talk to the perv.
It's possible both my daughters had situations like this, but they were kids at school, not anybody in the neighborhood, which may have changed what I would think. Because at some point I thought, this is called life. You're going to work with people who are, jerks.
Right.
You're going to
Amen.
you just learn to get along and you got to ignore them, and they're calling you a not a person or all the stuff. You don't have to hang out with them. You don't have to be their best
Escalated
friend.
quickly in that list.
What's that?
It escalated so quickly in that list. It was, you're a baby. You're not a person.
Yeah, you're not a person. Well, you're a baby non-person. But so somewhere there you got to toughen up yourself so you can learn to live in this environment. And then I'd invite them all over, and I'd have them watch Mean Girls like every day, especially the last scene. And just this is what happens to the Mean Girls.
This is what happens.
And then maybe I would.
This could be you, of Dan.
I own a bus.
Did someone get hit by a bus in Mean Girls?
Now,
I don't want to ruin it.
Oh,
okay,
I'm not. Okay.
Is there any situation in which you feel it's appropriate for the parent to step in and talk to this girl?
I think that would escalate things.
Yeah, no, that's going to make it worse. They don't care about you.
Not like that, right? I think to Ben's point, like you parent them like you parent your own kid, right? So like if they start acting a fool and mean, then like it's all about controlling yourself, right? Like not being like blown around by the winds of small children or even bad parenting, like that lets you get caught up and match their energy of ridiculousness, right? So like when someone says, "Hey, Sandra says that I'm not a person. Are you a person?" Yes. Well, then Sandra's not right.
Yeah.
So I guess
think about that.
or like she comes over and like maybe she behaves herself when she gets there, or maybe when they all pile in, you say, "Look, ladies, I need to talk to you real quick before we start the day. Look, the general rules around here is like we treat people with respect. And so if you feel like you can't do that, or I notice that you're struggling doing that, I'm going to ask you to rethink the way that you're acting. And if you can't fall in line with it, then we'll just have to ask you to not hang around until you're ready to give it the program, And like if you set the expectations on the way out in a calm, concise manner, not run over by your emotions or your perceived hurt from your daughter, right? Like that's how you would parent your own kid in the situation. Love them enough to treat them like one of your own kids, and they get to leave their mistakes at the door, and then you get to deal with your daughter and like the way that she talks to them around their friends or around over at her house, like whatever. Like we got to stop feeding in to like this righteous indignation about everything, right? Some things are just things, and you go, look, you're obviously not a baby, and you're obviously a person, and so like she's trying to make you upset. So like you can either take the bait, or you can go, well, I mean, until she's done like degrading me, maybe I don't want to hang over there anyway. Like stop trying to be upset about everything or find little mini justice. Like some things are just not what they're supposed to be, and we just move on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike. I wasn't laughing at anything you're saying. I was thinking to myself how funny it would be if Secular's advice was to go beat up the mom. Like, since you can't hit the kid, go beat the crap out of the mom.
Go find Janice. Give her the old
The
people's
unhelpful
elbow.
mother.
It's especially true with kids. Like this situation, like you get to start creating boundaries for adults in your life that act this way. Like, because they're destructive and they can actually tear whole cities down with their behavior. Mm-hmm. But kids, right? I mean, if you obviously can look and say, this house, we're better parents than everybody else. We know how to raise kids. Well, then raise that one. Right? Help that one if you've got this all figured out, right?
Yeah. Actually, I think there's a good encouragement in that, like, if it's your house and your family and people are over, like, it's totally fine. You may be giving them something that they never get.
Yep.
Someone who cares enough to say, hey, I'm not going to let you harm yourself or harm others or act like a buffoon in here. And
it's
like
our house.
Right. The presumption is that the kid's going to stomp their feet and get mad and steal your liquor and go home. And maybe they will. But you're treating them like a human being. Hey, I care enough about you to interact with you in this way. I don't know that I ever really, I'm pretty loose with kids in general, but I really don't care who your kid is. The kid is at my house, and people tend to come over and start teaching my youngest kid bad things. It's funny. Things that you not like terrible things, but things you laugh at when your parents aren't around. You get the little kid to do it because he's the littlest one around anymore. And okay, my kids do the same thing. And so I would say, hey man, don't pervert that kid. He's still innocent. You knock it off. Go talk about something else. I probably said that to every set of kids I've ever met who's been at my house. Hey, don't pervert that kid. That's not good stuff to talk about. Go talk about something else.
Yeah.
Okay. What? I have no reason to allow people to act foolish. But to Mike's point, I'm not mad at your children. I don't feel like, show them, take that kid. Right. I'm just it's the same thing I would say to everybody. You don't hold a vendetta against a child. And but feel free to guide them in the ways that are right.
Yeah, where you need to correct is when you say the phrase, I don't think it's right to let her enjoy our pool and games when she won't let my daughter play at her house. That's not the point. You're gonna try to teach your daughter how to do life generously and correctly, and you just as well teach that other kid too while she's over at your place if you feel like you got this nailed. Yeah. I would you need to look at that kid way different.
Yep.
Secular says, I assume the other mother is aware that her daughter refuses to allow your daughter to play at her house with the other kids. Because she hasn't intervened, the ball's in your court. Teach your daughter a lesson in assertiveness. The next time the bully shows up, your daughter should tell the girl she's not welcome and why. To be honest with you, I'd put it in my kids' court and say, what do you want me to do here? Right? Do you want them to come over, or do you want to tell them the what for? And if they say we're going to tell them the what for, then it's a teaching moment with your kid. You go, okay, so you can do that, it's an option, but let's look at the situation that she's in, right? Let's look at her behavior and why you think she's acting the way she is, and then let's see if we still feel the same way. Because if you're asking me as your dad, I'm leaning towards let's invite her over and love her well, and we won't let her get away with stuff here, but let's invite her over. She can use the pool.
Yeah, I think it's okay to accept that. That is often the case. People, depending on what environment they're in, they tend to adapt to it. If you run I don't even want to say a tighter ship, but one that demands that people treat each other well, and she can do that here, what does it tell me? It tells me that other environment isn't serving her well. And so what do you learn? What do you teach her? What do you gain positively for you and for the world by saying, you know what? I'm going to cut off access to that good environment. Why don't you go to punish you? Go to the place where you're the biggest jerk and sit in it over there. It's not your job to rescue the whole world necessarily and reparent everybody. But for heaven's sakes, man, they're walking right in.
And especially at the age that you're talking about, we're not near as worried about this. Find me when they're early teenage years or whatever, and some people are starting to borderline creepy or some people are borderline violent. This is a different discussion. But the discussion that you're having, I don't see any risk here.
Yeah. All right, you're listening to Live from the Path. Maybe you disagree with that. I don't know. Have you run into situations like this? Contested things between you and the children of the neighborhood and other parents who won't cooperate? What have you done?
It's always the kid where you're you never go, I don't understand it. That house is just such a warm, welcoming environment. It's never that guy.
No.
It's always the one where you're yeah, I don't know.
Right. You understand it. You got some sympathy. You're you know what? I've met your mom. I get it. I totally understand.
It always is. And so, honestly, once again, it's not legalism. You're taking in a whole situation and going, what's going on here? It's just putting a little thought into it is all.
Yeah. It's the same thing you would want to do for your kids in general. Like, you give them options. Hey, man, here's the terms of which you can come and enjoy the place. You accept the terms or not? If the answer is no, well, then you can't be here. Like, you can't bully other people here. You can't mistreat my kid here. You can't steal my liquor or the old duels or whatever it is you have. Like, that's not allowed. If you can abide by those things, enjoy the pool. And I think nothing of it. And I'm not going to I got my eye on you all the time. Like, welcome. This is what happens when you abide by the rules.
Yeah. I think once again, I think it's the theme of the day for me is putting your feelings or perceptions as if they're the only person that gets to drive the car. Like, you're hurt on your daughter's behalf because she's being mistreated at somebody else's house. Yeah, as a parent, that sucks, and nobody wants to hear that, right? But, you have zero reason to put your vindictive emotion in the driver's seat against an 8-year-old girl.
Right.
Right? That just don't make any sense.
Yeah. What people intend for evil, give them the old Jesus judo. Turn around and use it for good with more power than what they started at you. Mm-hmm. It changes the world. And, through Jesus, you're capable of doing it. And so I think it's the time to make it happen. You've been listening Live from the Path. Again, if you got any comments or feedback or questions for us to show, hit the Bob Eisenhower Live from the Path complaint line, 515-517-0085. Call or text. We'd love to hear from you. We will, fire up a show sometime soon, I'm sure. In the meantime, be faithful in the means. God will handle the ends. You've been listening to Live from the Path.